This is Chris Frostad, President and CEO of Purepoint Uranium. We're here in London this week for the Mines and Money show and meeting with
Me, maybe you, this guy.
of all this guy right here.
Yeah, busy over there. I've been walking around. Had time to do a lot of walking around. Lots of different types of investors. I'm saying.
It really is a mix and match group. Yeah, this year that we're seeing, we're getting all flavors. We were talking about a few.
Yeah.
More colorful flavors, but yeah,
There's some weirdos out there, folks.
Yeah.
That's what
but
we're saying.
It's consistent.
Yeah.
It's consistent. Yeah. It's consistent, and it's good. I mean, we find in shows like this, and we've been in a few this in the last month or so, that it's for us. It's helpful to see how the message is playing, because people come in, they'll ask questions. We'll deliver our pitch, if you will, and we'll see whether they're glazing over or nodding off or getting it.
Yeah.
And that's hugely helpful because we can tighten things up, because of course 95% of the messaging we don't get to do when we're staring at people.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because obviously a lot has happened for you recently with the ISO Energy deal, and lots going on in the market, and people have different perceptions of how to read that.
Right.
So, what worked? Do people get what you're trying to do? Do they get the business model?
They do, and they do. So but before we can explain the value proposition, we have to make sure they understand the problem. And so sometimes it takes a little longer than you know, we'd hoped. So that's part of the tightening up process as well. So it's you know, and a lot of people are just getting into uranium. We're finding here as well, and that's the other thing is where are they coming into the conversation? If it's early, if they're just hearing about it, if they want, you've got to start a little further back in the discussion.
But are they being attracted by the energy transition narrative and saying, oh, nuclear is part of that?
Well, of course, they're resource people.
Yeah.
And I think it's the nuclear conversation that's been going on for the last couple of years and getting stronger and stronger. And it's interesting stuff like the SMRs and Microsoft and Amazon and AI and put a reactor on the moon type stuff. So they're hearing a lot about the space, but they're resource people. So obviously they're hearing about what's this doing to uranium and should I be getting into uranium.
Yeah.
And so that's good. So, but we're finding we're having to educate a few people on what's going on in Saskatchewan and why it's prolific and why it's a good place to be, and why most of the explorers seem to be coming out of that area of the world, because that's where the bigger opportunities seem to be living these days.
Yeah.
And it's an easier story to tell.
Right.
You know, I mean, if you're in Saskatchewan, it's a pretty good story.
I think for me, the kind of moment which kind of helped nuclear was that kind of price increases across the board. 2-3 years ago, we had energy shortages across Europe. First, you know, you talk about first world problems. We suddenly experienced third world problems. There in the UK, across Europe, nuclear became fashionable again. Politicians decided actually maybe this is not a bad thing, and we've been riding that wave since. In terms of the narrative,
Yes, we've gone from wildly hated to wildly loved.
Yeah,
very quick period.
So that's kind of good news, and obviously for you guys working out, well, how do we insert ourselves into that story and you know get those investors on board?
Right, and I think the discussion now that we've got, and this is a story we've really been here testing and trying to explain to people what the upside of all this is the disconnect that's been going on between the commodity price and the equities. We've all seen it's not just uranium; we're seeing it in other commodities as well. But you know, again, we've talked about this before. The producers are you know, they're seeing joy out of all of this, but the developers aren't reacting the way that people have expected them to, and the explorers, which is the world we live in, certainly aren't reacting like people would have expected. And we get a lot of investors scratching their heads, going, "How can uranium be doing so well, and my explorer picks are doing so poorly?" And which brings us to the problem that we're trying to address, and that is the money is available, but we are as a group diluting ourselves into oblivion, and the commodity isn't giving the price or stock price the buoyancy that needs to kind of counteract that.
Right.
So we see uranium explorers drifting down, which again is puzzling in a thesis where we don't have enough uranium and we got to find more. And as we always talk about, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, and I want to talk about, he's a great phrase there, we're diluting ourselves. I think also possibly in danger of deluding ourselves. Okay,
oh, there's diluting. There's that too. Yeah.
And I really mean this, because I think what we can talk about Kazakhstan and China and US sanctions and all of those sort of macro factors. I want to hone in on kind of more around the economics, right? Because it comes down to supply. the demand is there for energy. Let's not kid ourselves. It's, we need nuclear energy. They need energy, consistent, reliable, baseload energy, right? If the uranium sector, which feeds the nuclear sector, doesn't, as use a lovely phrase here in the UK, pull its finger out and get on with stuff, I've asked this several times of several people across the past couple of years, is like, I think there's a danger that it gets designed out, right? So we need to make things easier. Governments need to make things easier. We need to get quicker.
We talked about this today on the panel. I was on the panel this morning, and one of the gentlemen there is, there was a lot of discussion around SMRs. And the big drive behind SMRs, we're going to make these things go because they can be deployed faster, quicker, easier, cheaper. But
where's the uranium coming from?
Where's the fuel coming from? That was the point. And you know, the question was asked. Well, if there's no surety of fuel, you know, then what have you done? Because nobody's going to build it. Nobody's going to build those things if the fuel isn't obviously in sight to run it. So you know, where we talk about this gap with demand going up and supply going down and what have you, I think they have to come back together, and it'll come. It's not just going to be the uranium line that comes, you know, that comes up. It's going to have to be they're going to have to find different ways to produce that that electricity.
Now the conversation at the moment is nuclear flavor of the month, because it's going to solve for big problems. For big problems with AI data centers, the Amazons, the Meta,
how wonderful it is.
Yeah, but it's not as we've talked about in the past, it's not a whole bunch of beans at the moment. It's not a huge. It's another incremental demand driver, and that's fine. But it doesn't solve the problem of how do we get there quicker with the fuel supply, with the uranium, enriched uranium. Unless governments wake up to that, step up to that, I think there's a problem, because that's not a Meta saying, we'll throw billions at this, don't worry, we'll build SMRs, it's all kind of cool. What they can't do is affect regulation and controls and all of those, and even the enriching component of it. It takes time to build this stuff, right? Is that conversation happening out there? Are governments awake to this in North America?
It doesn't seem to be. It doesn't seem to be, because there's so much excitement around the reactor side of the conversation and all the things it will cure and all the ills it will fix. That if it doesn't go hand in hand with the fuel, then you're talking smoke. And that's what's happening. And I think, and that's what's confusing a lot of investors on the resource side is how come this isn't going through the roof as well for all the conversation that's happening here. And in our world, it's again, it's access to capital to do what needs to be done, because we've seen time after time over the last 20 years, it costs tens of millions of dollars on the exploration side just to find, you know, a deposit, you know, just to poke a hole in something, and that's in, you know, the world's richest uranium district. And where's that money coming from? And it needs to come from somewhere, from stable hands and over a long-term period of time. So that's kind of the message that we're now talking about in terms of what we're doing, and what we've done, I think, to kind of counteract a bit of that. Is that we haven't seen the money coming from the majors. We haven't seen the money coming upwards. We're shuffling around, you know, the same deck chairs, and the same, you know, broken balance sheets, trying to come up with the money it needs and it takes to find these deposits.
Yeah, because at the moment I think you've got renewables have inserted themselves into. It's a quick fix. Solar panels easy to build, easy to erect, and off you go. Wind farms the same, and 50% of the energy in the UK. Certain times of the day and year comes from renewables. Amazing. Spain, the same. And it's quick. We don't have a 10-year approval process, build process for big reactors, etc. And even with SMRs on a modular basis, you know, it's going to take time to get the approvals to get those in place as well. So if I keep coming back to this, if nuclear doesn't get its act together and act in a kind of consolidated way, as in all aspects of the market need to kind of get together. Fossil fuel, and I'm talking oil, is going to continue. Not that I have a problem with that. I really don't. I think we need all of the above in terms of energy. I think oil will continue to be used. It will be the supply source. Renewables have stepped in there and they're going to fill a gap. So energy transition means just that. How do we get from here today to there tomorrow? And if nuclear doesn't speed up, is it part of the equation when we get to this?
And it can't speed up
need?
unless it knows where the fuel's coming from. I mean, it's got to move together.
Yeah.
Half of the equation can't.
Yeah, join up
leapfrog.
thinking, folks.
Yeah.
That's all we're asking for.
So,
It's a big problem, which I don't think enough people are talking about.
it is a big problem. And again, sitting on that stage, listening to these people get so excited about all the reactors that they're going to deploy, in the near
Yeah.
term, because you can deploy them so quickly. And I'm sitting there going, well, maybe, but how are you going to run these things?
Build it, and it shall
And
come.
it shall come. Well,
Not the way it works.
doesn't work. Doesn't work on the exploration side.
Yeah.
But it's,
Okay. Which I think, I think the knock-on effect is, look, you're doing your bit. You've got these joint ventures with people like ISO Energy, finding the stuff, and there's big kind of consolidation mergers, acquisitions happening out there. So the companies are setting themselves up to be able to get the money side of things, to make the discoveries, to build out the resources, so it is there. I think the problem is now a critical minerals issue, which is not getting the airtime.
Yeah, I agree. It isn't getting the same amount of airtime as the reactors are.
I think it's getting the hot airtime over here. It's also AI data centers. It's going to solve our problems. This year's flavor of the month thing. Anyway, sorry. I'm in trouble. In danger of ranting a bit here. Let's come back to Purepoint, and we'll pick it up in next week's show on the energy show. Okay. Purepoint. What are we looking at for 2025? What's happening?
It's busy. So we're just going through the planning process with our partners. As we said before, most of our projects now are in joint venture mode, which means that we are sharing costs with developers and producers, which is hugely helpful, and not only financially, but they're validating these projects that we're putting money in the right place, because they wouldn't otherwise. We're going through the planning processes with Chemical, with Orano, ISO, and we'll be busy next year. It looks like we're going to be spending about $10 million next year. We've got to somehow come up with about $3 million of that, which isn't bad. And as we said before, we earn a fee for doing all that hard work out there, and that pretty much covers our overhead. So I think we've got a bit of a baseline here where we're not about to dilute our shareholders into oblivion, and we're working on really good projects with really good partners, and it gives investors some confidence in terms of what we are doing, because it's not always easy to pick the winners from the losers, because it's all maps and mumbo jumbo sometimes, and you never
just
know.
feel like that sometimes. Obviously.
So we'll be like I said, we'll be working right through the year. We're starting with our Smart Lake, which is our joint venture with Cameco, in January. So we're drilling there for the first time in about 14 years, because Hook Lake sucked all the air out of the room. And we've got some really new targets over at Hook Lake that we need to get back to. One of them is driven by the discoveries that NextGen's been making to the south again. Go figure, they've found something else just on the other side of the claim line.
I said, Mr. Randall, I found something yesterday. It's some high grade.
F3?
Yeah.
Yeah, F3, but some really good stuff out
8
yesterday.
meters, 50%.
Something like that. About 4.5 meters, I think.
Meters, 50%.
Yeah, easy. They'll tell you.
He'll say so.
But they're putting out good stuff. So we'll be going through the winter. We're doing a lot of drilling. The $10 million we spend next year, most of that will be drilling.
Right.
A lot of it, I've said before, is permit driven and seasonality driven, but we'll be getting to our work on the projects around ISO's Hurricane Deposit. We now have all of those structures and features and geology that wrap off of that. And they've, in the past, already identified a lot of targets we have to hit. We've gone back and identified some new ones as well. So we're going to be drilling there probably through the summer and into the fall. So I think next year we will see a fairly consistent, month to month amount of news coming out of the basin.
That's
and
what
all
we
of these
want.
projects. Yeah.
That's what we want to hear. Lots of money, lots of drilling, because that's the important bit, right?
Yeah. No, it's good.
Good man. Appreciate
Yes.
you spending the time. I know it's busy around there, so
No,
see you next week when you're back in base.
Will do.